Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to our PACE webinar. It's my pleasure today to welcome Maciej Kurc, who's CEO of Insightia, and Rubén Valdés García, who's an associate partner with Insightia as well. This is a webinar that is I think very much of interest to us at PACE. At PACE, we have our Profitability-Analytics framework that encompasses three knowledge domains: managerial costing, investment management, and also revenue management. And as part of that revenue management domain, we have our 4 levers of revenue management that we've discussed in our various ebooks. And Rubén and Maciej also have a framework that they employ that's quite similar, and it was exciting to learn about their work. And I think we'll all learn a lot today from their presentation. It's most of us today are finance professionals. We've focused in the past perhaps on managerial costing, perhaps investment management. Revenue management is a relatively new domain to us, and it's something that we really need to learn more about to serve as business partners to the broader organization. So again, with having said that, I'll turn the session over to the presenters, and let's learn what they have to say.
Good, thank you. And I'll try to share my screen. Let's see, let's hope it works. Okay, it's working, right? Good. Thank you. Good, great. Thank you, Rafe and the team, for inviting us to conduct a webinar with you guys. Basically, it happened that Rafe and me, we discussed over LinkedIn because we have both interest in profitability management, and we had a chat, and it turned out that this could be very interesting for us, for Rubén and me, to come and talk to you guys about revenue growth management, because this is what we specialize in, Rubén and me. And then also we understood that you in your community via PACE also talk about revenue growth management. So this is quite, so hopefully you find it interesting and inspiring. Now we are broadcasting from Barcelona, Spain, where Rubén sits, and I'm sitting in Stockholm, Sweden, which is northern part of Europe. So we're from Europe, and the rest of us sitting all over the world, basically. Probably most of you guys in the US, but there are also people from Europe and other places. So we are excited that so many people have accepted and the invitation for the webinar, and so many of us have joined today and listened to us. And then obviously this webinar is recorded, so then it's going to be shared afterwards, so people can watch it as well via the link. So ideally, if you mute your microphones, so we will not have any disruptions. You can please write your questions in the chat during the webinar. And at the end of the webinar, we're going to take up those questions. So we'll basically take it one by one, and Rubén and me, and potentially Rafe, depending on the question, going to answer to those. Good. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is Rubén's and my experience, extensive experience, I would say, with revenue growth management. We've been working with that, specifically with the revenue growth management, for the last 30 years. Both of us are coming from the operations, so we've been responsible for implementing revenue growth management and also sales, for that matter, and we've been managing people. And also for the last years, we've been working as independent advisors. So I think we can say that we have learned something about it. So we have seen how it can be deployed in organizations and how it can bring value. Now, so what you will learn today in this webinar is our view on what revenue growth management is, and then what are the elements of that. Then we'll also talk about how revenue growth management creates value for the shoppers, for the consumers, for the partners, which is retailers in most cases, in consumer goods businesses, and also for us, for our own companies, so the companies that we help. So we will talk about when revenue growth management is needed, We'll talk about how to implement revenue growth management, and also we'll talk about how not to implement revenue growth management. So what are the problems that sometimes occur while implementing revenue growth management? And as said, at the end, we'll try to save 10 to 15 minutes for the Q&A. So please write your questions and comments in the chat, and we'll take them at the end. Good. Yes. Good. I know. I hope you. Well, I'm sure you know this guy, Warren Buffett. This is obviously an American guy. He's definitely not. Well, we actually don't know, but we think he's not an RGM expert. At least he's not in that field. But definitely he knows how to create value for his companies, for himself, and for his associates. Definitely. But this is also very interesting what he said. So it's claimed that he said that the price is what you pay and value is what you get. Because the concept the concept of value is distinct from price, obviously, because the price is an expression of value. So what value that the consumers or shoppers are willing to pay for the product or service. Now, the value itself and value creation is integral, and it's a core concept within revenue growth management, which we'll talk about later on in the presentation. So yes, so move on. Now, very briefly about ourselves before talking about RGM. So myself, I've been working 17 years, basically with revenue growth management, 17 years, altogether, 14 years in the operations in the company, in line, and then 3 last years as an independent advisor. Now, I've been working with all the levers of revenue growth management, and we'll later explain them, but this is the pricing, this is the assortment management, trade promotion management, trade spend, which is the rebate management, mix management, and you name it. We concentrate on the strategy, so revenue growth management strategy, but we do also implementation, tactical revenue growth management, and we help in implementing it for some companies as well. So beside that, we also do keynote speaking and we do trainings within that field. So in operations, I've been working in sales. I've been a sales director for Norway and Sweden within spirit business. I've been RGM and category head, so I've been implementing revenue growth management in a few countries in Europe, and I've been also business development director in Eastern European countries. So, and each of those roles, I've been employing the revenue growth management, basically, more practically or conceptually or different ways. And I've seen this, how it's working, how it can bring value to all the stakeholders. Now, my key experience, operational experience, is mainly from Carlsberg, which is beer, water, soft drinks, ciders, and other alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks. And Anora, which is #1 in spirits and wine in the Nordic Europe. So shortly about me, Ruben, yeah?
Yeah, thank you, Maciej. Well, my profile is quite similar to Maciej, no surprise. So I am also a real RGM expert. I've been working nonstop on this for more than 14 years now, 9 as a consultant, and before that, 5 as revenue management director, PepsiCo Europe. Now, as in the case of Maciej, I have been working on all types of things you can actually work during those 14 years, as you would imagine, in all types of things you can work in this area. So optimization of pricing, optimization of mix, of promotions, of trade terms. But also, I have spent quite a lot of time helping businesses to develop the necessary all capabilities which are needed to manage your business with this mindset, with this RGM approach. Okay. I've worked fundamentally in FMCG and in Europe, and within Europe there is hardly any. I mean, I've really worked everywhere in Europe. As you know, we have many countries here in Europe, so really many different countries with different categories within FMCG, different situations in terms of brand strength, all of this, right? And also from, I would say the other point which is worth mentioning, as in the case of Maciej, is that I have a quite strong operational commercial background, which I acquired basically at PepsiCo. Yeah, I spent 16 years in PepsiCo. I worked 16 years over there, and I started actually in the Spanish snacks market unit as a key account manager, yeah, for organized trade. And in a very nice situation, it was about turning around the channel, making a money-losing machine into a money-making machine. Actually, this was the challenge we faced. So I joined the business like a key account manager. Then I became the head of the national key account manager team. And then finally, within the Spanish snacks business, I became the trade development director for the business, which covered basically category management and trade marketing for organized trade, but then also trade marketing and channel development for traditional trade. And then the last 5 years, as I already mentioned, I was revenue management director at PepsiCo Europe. So far, so good about our background, I guess.
Yes, and here's, I mean, you hear a lot that we talk about the FMCG, as we call it here in Europe, and then our CPG, which is mostly used term in US consumer packaged goods. So basically, what you might ask, okay, well, how is this relevant for other industries? Well, we would say that this is what we are going to talk about. And I mean, generally, revenue growth management is relevant for all consumer goods products. It doesn't need to be fast-moving or packaged goods. I mean, we've been working recently. There was a Japanese customer. We've been working with consumer electronics, and we applied basically the same principles. Now, application of this, or the focus of those different levers, enablers within our toolbox, it could be different, but that's not so much driven by the product itself. It's more the channels, it's the structure of, it's a mix of the products and so on and so forth. I think that's what mainly drives the complexity of the choice of which levers, enablers we're choosing. So it's relevant for other industries as well. Mainly for those where you have a human who is making a decision at the end. So basically, and those what you sell in retail channels of different sorts. So good. So the last slide about Insightia, yes. So we are here to help companies to become better at revenue growth management. I mean, many companies, they have it, so we help them to become better. And there are many of our clients which are just starting or don't have it, so we help them to set it up basically from the start. So we help at different levels. So I mean, recently we've been helping Coca-Cola, which you might think this is the best company in revenue growth management, at least used to be, and we've been helping them as well because they also have some opportunities or challenges sometimes, and they need support from people like us. Now, also what is very central in what we're doing is the concept of value, which is here in the middle, value proposition. So we help the companies to strengthen the shopper and customer value proposition. Now the shopper is the one who is buying the shelf, and the customer in this case is a trade partner, it's a retailer. That's how we define it within our framework at least. So, and those obviously are very important in the whole revenue growth management. And then as an outcome of this is we are helping them to drive sustainable, so it's a long-term, profitable revenue growth. We like the term that short-term profits are good for long-term profits, it's true, but we are concentrating that whatever changes we're making, that the profitability is coming also long-term. Because, I mean, most of you guys who are here within the finance community, you know, of course, that you can increase profits very fast, but this could be very painful. It could be bad for long-term profits as well, actually, if you cut the costs too fast, too quickly in their own way. Okay, anyway, we go further. Then, yeah, so tell us, Ruben, what revenue growth management does actually, or can do.
Actually, the first thing we would like to share with you is a reflection on why is it that RGM is becoming so popular? Yeah, why is it? Now, the fact is that we see many businesses, especially those who operate in mature categories, mature markets, which at some point in time face a situation like the one we're describing here, the left part of the slide, which is the vicious value destruction cycle. Now, what happens here? Those companies face themselves with a stagnant or even declining volumes. At some point in time, after having tried many things, someone said, well, maybe we should reduce prices. Yeah? And they do so. Now, the problem is that quite often, sadly, things don't go as expected in the sense that you reduce prices, but volume doesn't pick up really, or only a little bit. So what happens? That the value pie actually shrinks. And with this shrinking actually means that margins shrink, not only your margin, but also your trade partners' margins. Now, in the case of your margins, and we say we're talking about the company, right? The company margins. Now, this puts obviously the short-term P&L targets under pressure. And as you probably know very well, better than us, very often the immediate reaction is to cut on investments to try to deliver against the short-term P&L targets. Now, the sad thing about this is that you start cutting on investments which you actually require to ignite or to fuel, let's say, sustainable volume growth. We're talking here basically about A&M, but not only A&M, R&D, things like that. Now, as a result of that, what you do actually is that you actually accelerate the volume decline trends you were trying to mitigate at the very beginning of this. And well, the next reaction is again to try. The next question is then, well, maybe we should actually be more aggressive with our price decreases. So you decrease prices again, and then, well, now I guess you see why we call this a vicious value destruction cycle. Now, this is where revenue management at some point in time can kick in and actually help you to turn around the situation and turn this into what we call here a virtuous value creation cycle. Now, how does this typically start? At some point in time, you revert the strategy and you increase basically prices, which creates actually more value, and as a result of that, your margins start to recover. And then you have again funds available to reinvest, to further reinvest in volume driving initiatives, consumer trade initiatives, whatever. Now, as we are talking to finance community here, is we want to stress this quite a lot. I mean, revenue management, of course, is there to help to deliver against the P&L, but it's not only that. It can't be only that. It is very important, it's extremely important that part of the value you generate via RGM is reinvested in the sustainable volume driving initiatives. If you don't do that, you probably will not be able to ignite this virtuous value creation cycle over the long term, medium and long term, okay? Yeah.
Okay. Good. So how do we know? How can we know if your company is already working according to revenue growth management and is set for sustainable, profitable growth? Yes. Okay. So during our long RGM experience life, we have concluded that there are, broadly speaking, top 5 organization behaviors, as we call it, which show you if your organization or the organization that you're helping, in case you're a consultant, then if they're actually working according to this model, and if there is an opportunity actually. So this, what we are presenting now, this could be used also as like a mini, like a mini diagnostic actually to show if your company has got potential to improve your sustainable, profitable growth. Okay, so let's go. Let's move on then. Number 1, very important. So the entire organization is aligned and focused on sustained profitable revenue growth. And this could be expressed by a growth strategy, which is aligned with the whole organization. And the whole organization is working according to that. So it's known by everyone, and it's a common understanding, starting from the board room down to the sales representatives. That this is the strategy. That's how that's what we are doing in this company. And we are about creating profitable growth, so both profits and top line. The second thing, also critical, we see it actually quite often. It sounds maybe a bit silly, or maybe you might say, okay, why would that be important? Yes, this is actually extremely important because we see quite often, unfortunately, or fortunately, because these are typically the companies we're helping actually. Is that the strategies or key decisions are not based on the market insights. Market insights, in our understanding, is understanding of the consumers or users, depending on the product, shoppers who help people make decisions in store, in front of the shelf, or on the internet, and then the retailers or trade partners. These insights also sometimes also omitted, believe it or not, and then also other insights. And they could be qualitative insights based on analytics, data, and quantitative, which is then based on in studies, consumer studies, for example, or shopper studies. So that's very important that is there. If you don't see it at your company or the company you're helping, then definitely there's a room for growth. Now the success KPIs. So RGM KPIs are clearly defined, and the targets also clearly defined. So for example, you would have if you would be like the best in class, so you would have for each of your category, what you are selling, and for each of your markets, or even channel you're selling in, you would have clearly defined, for example, net sales per kilo or per liter, depending on category, growth above inflation over the next 3-4 years. So you go to that level if you're best in class in that. And then, so you have defined the key KPI, which is in this case we suggest that's per kilo or per liter. It's one of the ones, but there are more of those. But this is one of the key ones. And then clearly expressed by as a target for the specific category and market and sales channel. So that's what we see at the best in class companies. Yeah. Now number 4, those companies who are creating sustainable and continuous value growth, sustainable and continuous value, profitable growth. They also use basically all the revenue growth management levers which are available. And we will talk a little bit about, so this is about pricing, it's about assortments, it's mix management, it's trade spend, trade promotion management, and all the enablers which are available there. So the data, skills, capabilities, you name it. Rubén will talk about it in a second. And the last but not least, also that the companies which achieve that, what we are talking about, they have feedback loops or continuous improvement in place. That's being very important, because RGM, we believe, and we've seen this happening. It's a journey. So you cannot turn the big sheep from one driving one way to going to another way very fast. I mean, it's a continuous journey. You do it slowly, going to this direction, and you learn why you go. So that's why it's very important that you have these continuous loops in place. And whenever you have a success, you learn from it, you replicate it, you do more of that. And if there is a mistake, there's a gap, you understand what is behind the gap, why it's happening, and then you correct it. And then it's a continuous process, monthly cycle, as we typically recommend in the organizations. Good. So so how do we define RGM? Yes, RGM is a cross-functional approach to managing mainly the top line of the P&L as to deliver sustained value creation for consumers, shoppers, trade partners, and new company. So in this forum, we would like to stress the 2 elements of this. It's a cross-functional approach. So it's not one function, it's not one person, it's not a tool, it's not a role within an organization which is doing this. This is typically RGM team, if such a team is in place, or it's a finance team, it could be driving this as well, together with the marketing and sales team, working together, an insights team or category teams, depending on which teams you have there in an organization, but working together to the same towards the same direction. And then what might be interesting, or maybe a little bit surprising for some of you, it's about the top line of the P&L. Typically we look at everything which starts from the shelf price, so from the consumer price which is there, then the average price, promo price, discounts, list price, down to the gross margin, and that's where we typically stop. And then, I mean, obviously the effects of our work, you want to see it at the EBITDA, at the top bottom line, but typically what you optimize, what you play is with everything which is above the COGS. That's quite specific. But of course, I mean, we're not fundamentalists. Sometimes we look at cost structures as well, but this is rather seldom. It's mainly the pricing, mix management, and so on. So RGM is not a function, it's not a role, it's not a tool. It's a cross-functional approach. That's how we define it. Good. So what are the elements of that? Rubén, tell us a little bit more. You're mute, Rubén.
The classic. Okay, sorry guys for that. Now, what I was saying is that now that we have clarified that this is a cross-functional approach really to managing the business, right? Especially the top line of the P&L. Now let's have a closer look at the key elements. And very often when we talk about this, what we see is that most people, when we talk about RGM, think about the thing to see in the middle of the slide. So the levers, pricing, promotions, assortment, trade. And this is what typically comes to your mind if you hear RGM. Now, this is actually at the core of RGM, but equally important, it is to acknowledge that in order to fully capture the potential of optimizing those 4 levers, you need to have 2 more things in place. The first one is a solid value growth vision. Yeah, and the second thing are a series of org enablers, which Maciej has been already mentioning to some extent. Now let's have a closer look at the first element. What do we mean by a value growth vision? Well, here we mean that basically your commercial strat plan should clearly reflect how you are planning to increase value, to create value, yeah, over the next 3 to 5 years for the key 3 stakeholders we are talking all the time. So the consumer or the shopper, if you want, your customers, your trade partners, and then obviously your company. Now, if you think about the consumer, we are talking about things here. One of the key things you should address, you should see it reflected in this commercial strat plan is how you are planning, or what is your ambition in terms of increasing the perceived value of your offering over time, yeah, among consumers. Very important. And what are the key initiatives which are going to drive this increase in perception? So in other words, what's going to be the role of innovation, product innovation, packaging innovation, quality enhancement, all of those things, right? Equally important, how are you planning to effectively communicate those initiatives, yeah? So that you actually increase the perceived value of your offering. And then last but not least, well, I mean, how much resources do you need? Yeah? Will you need to actually be able to deliver against that vision? If we think about customers, here we're talking about basically 2 things. The first one is having a clear vision of how you would like your customer margins to evolve over time, both in terms of percentage or sales, but also in terms of absolute margins. But then also what channel specific, yeah, growth levers you're going to try to pull, yeah, in each case to create value specifically for a channel. And then last but not least, obviously, value creation for your company. This is what we're here for, right? Now, here you need to have a clearly articulated algorithm in terms of how you're going to create value over the next 3 years, and how much of that is coming from volume growth on one hand, and how much is coming from net revenue per kilogram or liter on the other hand, if you're talking about packaged goods, yeah? And very clear, and as Maciej mentioned, also at a certain with a certain level of granularity, yeah, below the company level level. Okay, so far so good about the value growth vision. Now, if we go to the 4 levers, the things we typically come to our mind, here we want to stress a concept which we think is quite important, which is that the optimization in each of them has 2 distinct levels. One is the strategic or the structural level. The second one is the tactical level. Now, the best thing probably is to give you an example. In one case, let's choose pricing, for example. What do we mean by that? Well, if we think about strategic pricing optimization or structural pricing optimization, we're thinking about things like, okay, in which price segment within the category pricing pyramid would I like my brand or sub-brands of a brand to compete, right? Once I have defined that or redefined that, a very important second question I need to work on is to identify what is the optimal price index versus an identified key competitor, okay? If we are, and this is all structural if you want, or strategic, but if we're working on the more tactical level on pricing, this is the classic yearly, let's say, list price increases and whenever possible, the related recommended retail sales prices, which go with them, right? This is tactical, it's a year by year. Now, tactical doesn't mean that it can be tactical and have actually quite a big impact on the performance, right? And what we have exemplified here for pricing actually applies to all of the levers. Now, in all of them, you can work on the more structural level or on the more tactical level. Now, last but not least, and I won't actually spend too much time on this because Maciej has already discussed a little bit of it. It is, I mean, we cannot insist enough. RGM is a way of managing your business. It's a mindset. It's an approach to managing the business. So if you really want to transition typically from a volume-oriented let's say, approach to a more value creation approach, you need to have the right, you need to modify probably to adapt certain enablers or enablers as to make it happen. And here we're talking about many things, but basically fundamental about KPIs, processes, capabilities, and data and tools. Data and tools has to do with what Maciej was insisting a lot, the insights, fact-based decision-making rather than gut feel-based decision-making. And in terms of KPIs, the ones the very top line KPIs, which we have already addressed, which is volume on one hand and net revenue per kilogram or per liter on the other hand. But not only that, we're talking about specific KPIs for optimizing each of the levers, for example, return of investment in the case of promotions, yeah, or whatever. And then last but not least, in terms of processes, well, let's make sure that if we want to change the way we see the business, especially in the commercial planning and in the commercial tracking against planned processes, we actually incorporate that vision. Yeah. And last but not least, capabilities. Yes, in order to optimize those 4 levers, you need certain. We will speak a little bit more about it later. You need certain capabilities to make it happen. Okay. Good.
Okay, thank you, Ruben. Very good overview. I hope you got a good understanding how we define, how we see revenue growth management. And then the question comes, okay, well, how to implement it actually in an organization? And here we give you a expert tip how to do it in a smooth and efficient way. And we promise you, if you follow this process, if you do it in these steps, so in a similar way, then you will implement it definitely faster than many other companies. So it will not take you 10 years; it will take you a shorter time. But I think we don't want to fool you. I think it's a process. It takes time. So it could take, if you don't have it in place now, and if you do it super fast, it could take you 1 to 2 years, and then you will see already good results. But it's a journey. Most of the companies that we work with or at, it took them quite many years to figure it out. Now, based on this experience, we believe that it doesn't need to be so long. It doesn't need to be 15 years. It can be much faster than this. Okay, so. How do we do it? So what we suggest you do is, number 1 is you build a growth strategy, which is based on the market insights, which is based on the shopper insights, consumer insights, which is based on the customer insights as well. So you take this very much outside-in approach. So because you want to place your growth strategy in the business reality, in the market reality. Because also what we say about we think about strategy as very concrete building blocks, concrete levers that address some profit pools that you want to attack. So it's not some wishy-washy kind of dream wall, but it's a bit more specific than this approach. Yes, and also I think the strategy needs to be quite clearly defined that it's about both growing top line and bottom line. So there's no doubt in the boardroom, there's no doubt in the commercial team, there's no doubt among sales representatives or even drivers that this company is about growing both top line and bottom line, and it is possible. And I mean, I guess many of you guys have seen it. This is possible. It's not either or, it's both. Now this strategy needs to be expressed and clearly defined by KPIs and targets and incentives. And as we said, if you use in your growth strategy, if you have you also your levers, you have the pricing strategy, you have your assortment strategy, you have your trade promotion strategy, you have your discount or rebate structure or trade spend, as we call it, strategy. Then each of these levers also has to have quite detailed KPIs for that. So for the pricing, it could be net sales per kilo development over the next few years above inflation. Promotion, it could be return on investment. 5 percentage points improvement on each year-on-year, or uplifts or lifts on promotions. In assortment could be mix improvement, which is also being tracked. And then on the trade terms, it could be the margin which you are taking, all the system margin split. So the margin which is available for you and retailers, and you take a bigger part. So on year, you try to improve that as well versus the retailers. And then at the same time, all the incentives, and again, these are so basics, but actually we talk about it because we see this quite often not being in place. The incentives of people, especially the commercial teams and the sales reps, so people a little bit lower, below the boardrooms, but they have incentives which are linked to the value growth. We actually have seen many times that Ruben and me actually, we worked, and we often come back and talk about this project because it was a big company, and we try to convince brand managers about why we should grow value, why we should increase prices or optimize the value within the category which we're talking about. And the people we work with were very much against that. We couldn't understand. I mean, there was no argument we could use, no insight we could use to support that. We had conjoint studies to support the elasticity studies to support our argument. Nothing was coming through. And then at the end, we found out this the brand manager who was responsible for that, she was actually incentivized on volume market share. So obviously this what we are suggesting to her was against her objectives, and then she was against it. So this, it could be as simple things as that. So I think it's quite important that all the elements in the organization, all the levers in the organization, they have incentives which are aligned with the strategy and the key KPIs. So now RGM resources and skills. Now here RGM is a lot about, is very analytical. It can be very analytical, and actually it is very analytical. Yes. So that's why you need people who are able to combine external market data, so POS data or Nielsen or RI data, whatever data you have in your market, so sellout data, together with your internal data, with your financial data, so your internal P&Ls. So the people have to be very savvy in going between those data and in combining this, because that's really where the magic happens when you combine those two, these types of data. So that could also be interesting for you guys who are from finance community. That this is a tip for you guys to get acquainted, very comfortable with working with sellout data, also, and not only be very good at internal P&Ls and profitability of products. So there's people which you have who are supposed to work with RGM. They also need to be able to have a big picture, to see a little bit more strategic view, but also have a very good eye for details. Because RGM is also about details. I mean, you spot opportunities, analyzing the data, and there's also quite a lot about tactical improvements here and there on pricing, on promotion, and so on. So that's why it can be quite heavy. And some of the processes like trade promotion management, it is very analytical. So that requires quite good analytical brains for that. Yeah. So the next, number 4, which is, we talked a lot about it, data, insights, and RGM tools. In most cases, at least the companies we work with, we see typically that the companies have got actually too much data, but sometimes not the right data. So what we help these companies is basically say, okay, so select this one here, this is relevant, this is relevant, this is relevant, and we help them to combine and take insights out of this, and we teach them how to do it actually. Because that's our job. I mean, to coach and teach the companies how to use the data better. And then we sometimes say, look, I mean, okay, you have all this data, it's a lot of data, but you're actually missing this. So maybe you should acquire that, and maybe get rid of this one if you have a limitation on the budgets. Yeah. And then RGM tools. Yes, I think, you know, if you're a mid-size, or if you're working on helping a mid-size, a smaller company, you can start with Excel. You can still do a lot in Excel or whatever calculation sheets you're using, Google Sheets or whatever. It's okay. You can do quite a lot in Excel. But then as you grow, as you become more ambitious, more professional, you need some professional RGM tools, because then it becomes too complicated, too complex. So that's basically like this. And of course, at some stage, then you're ready for AI. When you have the processes in place, you know what you want to look, what you're looking for, then you can also start applying AI. Now, based on my own experience, I would my company, I would not start with AI if you don't have processes and all the things in place which we mentioned before, strategy, KPIs, and all that. Because jumping into AI, if you're not mature yet, it could confuse you more than actually give you benefits. That's my opinion, but of course it might change as the AI is evolving as well. Okay, so we go to the last one. You need to close the loop with a continuous plan, do, review cycle. I mentioned that already before, and Rubén was also talking about it, but we see this as quite critical in the whole process, because as mentioned, RGM is a journey, and you need to learn as you go along and improve. Because there's one thing also which is important, there's no one size fits all. It's not like if one of you or one of our customers comes to us and say, look, can we buy a blueprint or playbook, RGM off the shelf? No, there's nothing like this. I think, well, there are some principles. I mean, you apply, but the application is quite specific and different per specific category, specific market, specific channel setup, and so on and so forth. Your position in the market, if you're number 1, you're going to use such a RGM. If you're number 2 or 3 or 4, then you're going to use another type of RGM actually. So that's why there's no one size fits all. And the way to improve and become better is to have this continuous cycle. So you catch successes, you build on it, you make it better and bigger, and then those gaps and the mistakes you correct. Now, one thing which is also, it's a tip, it's a practical tip, also make sure you have, you work with root cause analysis, RCA as we call it. It's very important. Actually, it's might sound a bit boring, most of you might even know it, RCA, root cause analysis, but we see it actually quite often in organizations that the fast-moving consumer goods commercial organization, they want to make decisions fast. So they look at the data, they want to move fast, make decisions and move on. But often it can this approach, without having this proper understanding actually what the issue is, can cause more problems than benefits. So for example, you think about that, you increase prices, the volume goes down much more than you expected. Then you say, oh shit, we have to take, sorry for my Latin, you need to take the prices up again, down again, because you lost volume, because that's what you see, right? It's obvious. But then you might miss, if you don't do a proper analysis, you might miss that actually maybe there is a channel shift, maybe there are some customers who delisted you, maybe there is a distribution issue, maybe there is out of stock or whatever. I mean, there could be so many different reasons why your volumes go down. So it was not related only to the volume increase in this case. So that's why I think it's a simple example, but it's actually a real example, real life example. We see it over and over again. So root cause analysis as part of the continuous plan to check that. Good. Okay. So now you know how to how we suggest that you can go about implementing or upgrading your revenue growth management. So Ruben, tell us what kind of typical errors or mistakes that we observed working with the big companies, so medium and big companies.
Yeah, let's go for that. Well, as Maciej mentioned, and we cannot insist enough on that as on other few things we are insisting quite a lot during this webinar. Moving to a value creation, let's say, mindset and way of working is not necessarily an easy journey. It's not necessarily a short journey. It is complex. It's actually complex. It depends also obviously on what the starting point is, but it tends to be complex. I mean, in our experience, there are so many companies who are struggling for years. Have been struggling to actually really make it happen, even though they know that it can bring value. Now, and the reason is, well, many mistakes can be done during that journey. And the problem with that, we're talking about the change management element here, which is very strong, is that each time something goes wrong, this can create quite a lot of frustration in the organization, and it can slow down quite a lot what you want to achieve, right? Now, a few examples of typical mistakes we have observed during our experience, both as consultants, but also working in a business, operating in a business. The first is about the value growth strategy we were mentioning at the beginning. And the sources of weakness, as we say here, weak value can be various, but the most common ones are actually, one very common one is that, the business has a value growth vision and strategy, but it is very inward looking, really very inward looking. It's basically looking at what do I need. It is not based, this value strategy is not based on a deep, solid understanding of the market, of the category, of the consumer shopper dynamics and trends which are actually relevant and which very often are at the heart of the value creation opportunity. So this is a very, very common mistake, not looking inwards rather than outside of your company to find value creation opportunities. The other one is one which relates a lot with your function, is that some companies, they have a qualitative value creation strategy, but it is not translated really into what we call the growth, a value growth algorithm for the company. So you cannot really see how this value strategy is then over the next 3 to 5 years translating in margin increase, and how much of this is coming from volume, how much is coming from net revenue per kilogram or liter. Okay, now to some extent, maybe, well, a second very, very typical mistake we observed is that many businesses, because of those short-term P&L pressures we were talking about, which are obviously understandable, but it seems like their RGM approach is very focused on the short term and therefore on what we call quick wins. Now, quick wins are actions, initiatives, which typically can deliver within the running year or at least next year. Now, by doing so, you obviously achieve something, but the problem is that you are probably losing a lot of money on the table because you're not addressing, or you're neglecting, or you're down prioritizing the most structural optimization opportunities. And the reason for that is that finding the right structural optimization initiatives takes time. doesn't happen in 1 week or in 1 month, and then implementing them typically takes more time. But again, typically the structural optimization opportunities bring much more value to the business than the short-term quick wins. Now, partially related to what we are talking here is another typical mistake, if you want, or miss, which is that RGM is very often, if you look at the business, RGM is very often just focused on pricing. Yeah, and well, I mean, let's not misunderstand or create confusion. Pricing is it's for sure the most important lever in terms of value creation. This is true. But what we are saying here is that if you only, and typically it's short-term pricing, it's this list price increases for next year, what those companies actually focus on. If you only focus on that, and you don't focus on promotion management, mix management, trade terms optimization, you're just leaving money on the table again. Yes, and in some cases, the money you're leaving on the table could be actually sizable, especially if you have been already pulling the pricing, the tactical pricing lever for quite some time, and you're getting to the exhaustion, to the limits of that lever. Okay. Now all of those typical mistakes have to do with the, let's say, the value strategy, value optimization, but there are others which have to do more with the org enablers we are talking about. Yeah. And I think that here we will answer part of some of the questions some of the participants had and shared in the chat. Now, limited lever optimization capability. What do we mean by that? Well, to be honest, yes, doing RGM requires strong analytical skills, sure, but this is not, I mean, most companies have those analytical skills in the teams which are actually responsible to develop, let's say, value creation initiatives. But the typical miss is that because probably they lack the cross-functional, needed cross-functional background, especially commercial background, they often miss the commercial relevance so what? I mean, they analyze quite a lot of data, but they are not able to actually, don't have the right frameworks in place as to extract the relevant commercial so what's, and, or if you want, because again, they lack this cross-functional experience, they find it very hard to translate those so what's into actionable, commercially actionable plans. And as a result of that, when it comes time to actually bring the internal key stakeholders on board who actually need to make it happen, to implement it, namely commercially, they fail. They fail because they are not able to articulate the action plans properly. Okay. And then last but not least, there is another typical mistake which has to do with the fact that in many businesses, RGM is initiated because there is a high level in one function, at high level, typically in sales or finance in sales. There's a sponsor, high-level sponsor who actually believes in that. And this is good actually to get initial momentum if you want. But then at some point in time, this very often becomes like a hurdle if you want in terms of making RGM really cross-functional. Yeah, and we observe this quite a lot. At some point in time, RGM is perceived as something which happens within a function, and it's not perceived as a cross-functional contribution to actually creating value, right? So this is another typical mistake. Okay. Now we have more actually typical mistakes, but I will hand over to Maciej to discuss the rest of them.
Yeah, we have here, but I think due to time, I think we'll have to take it in our next webinar. So I think it's so we need to finish, and we want to give you time to address the questions and comments which were in the chat, and I see there are quite many, which is great. So I mean, yeah. So we hope that we was inspiring and interesting what we've been talking about, and yeah. So what you've heard today is okay, our view on RGM. You've heard about our view on how to implement it and our tips how to implement it. You've heard about how to check if your organization has potential for benefiting from RGM, and you also heard about what are the typical pitfalls when implementing RGM. So now, okay, then the question is, okay, are you thinking of taking RGM further in your organization, or you're thinking of actually implementing it because you find it relevant for your business? Then we have a small gift for you. So basically, anyone who is going to write to us after this webinar to me, basically, that is interested, we can offer you this free diagnostic. And free diagnostic, it's a very quick test from our side based on our methodology to check where could be the biggest potentials in your organization, starting from RGM. And this is free because you've been participating and listening. So it's worth roughly 5,000 K. That's 5,000 USD. That's roughly what we charge for such a thing. And what you get is our interview to begin with. You get a workshop, 3 hours, and then you get a report out of that. I think it could be very valuable for you in case you're thinking of implementing it, or you want to take your RGM further. Yeah, it could be nice little thing for your next steps. Okay, good. So write to me via LinkedIn, and then the offer is valid 1 week. Good. Okay, so let's go to the and the only two first participants that contact us. Okay, good. Then we go to the Q&As.
Let me just interject an observation, because again, I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that this was an area that PACE is very interested in, and we have there's also a resource on our website on our revenue management ebook, and it's just interesting how closely your levers of revenue management align with the ones we've identified. So, you know, one of our levers is pricing, which is similar to what you have. One is inventory allocation, which kind of ties into your promotions. Product configuration is very much aligned with your assortment lever, and then duration control is trade terms. So it's definitely I think we're very much aligned, and if definitely they can follow up with you, and they can also check out the resources available on our website as well. So let me ask you, I'll ask you the questions that are in the chat here. And the first one is, can you name key capabilities and data and tools that you would recommend to establish and maintain RGM?
Ruben, you want to take this one, or shall I take it?
I can take it. I think we have already touched upon it to some extent,
Yes.
and we have limited time. But in terms of capabilities, for sure, you need to have analytical capabilities, but then you need to blend them. I mean, whoever is actually responsible, not necessarily accountable, responsible for driving the agenda needs to have in the team, needs to have the right analytical capabilities for sure, but then also the right commercial acumen somehow, to actually translate those insights we're talking about the whole time into commercially actionable plans. This is very important. And you also need someone who is able to actually, with the leadership skills, to actually bring commercial people on board, which is not necessarily always easy. Now, here we cannot stress this enough. Having the right KPIs in place and incentive system in place can help a lot. If you work on value share, and we're talking about packaged goods companies here, value share for marketing, and your key account managers are actually incentivized by net sales or net sales per kilo per liter. This makes things quite easier. This is one thing. And there are many others, but this is really where we see typically actually the biggest gaps, and what for some reason companies do not tend to think about. Now, in terms of tools, I would say it depends really on what, if we think about the levers, it depends really on what the levers are relevant in your case. But as we already mentioned, I mean, really everywhere, nearly everywhere, pricing and pricing architecture is one of the most important levers. It has the biggest potential, short and long, midterm. So there are pricing, let's say, optimization techniques and studies which are specifically designed to understand what we call the perceived value, for example, or to understand the impact of different, let's say, pricing scenarios, pack price architectures, and so on and so on. Here we're talking about conjoint analytics, for example. Those are, let's say, tools or insight studies which can help you a lot to actually, again, base for fact-based decision making, or to minimize, let's say, the risks associated to your decision making. Then, if promotions is a big ticket in your case, then you will need to have ideally a tool which integrates both the analytical engine, if you want, in order to be able to properly calculate return of investment of your promotion, which is, if you want to do it properly, it's quite complex. But on the other hand, it should also enable you to plan, to enable this plan, do review process in terms of planning, reviewing your promotional performance quite quickly. Without the tool, without the proper tool, it is a very, very complex thing, because of the amount of work, and data which need to be processed to make decisions quickly and course corrections specifically from the learnings. Maciej, go ahead.
Sorry. Just because one thing also to add to this, which is very important, is that because we also see it, unfortunately, many times that many companies are buying the tool because they think that the tool will do the work, and especially on promotion. But then it's you need people who actually who know how to operate the tool, because you need to have smart people to do this as well. Because the tools themselves, they will not do the job. I mean, there's still humans. We still haven't seen the AI who would do this. I guess soon will come to do the decisions and suggestions instead of us. But I think we still think that the humans are, for some time, there's a place for us. So good.
So there's a related question to what you just said, and it said, is it not wise to start from the RGM tool, as it'll structure your growth strategy and tactic? So,
well, there is actually, based on my experience, if I take it, it's okay, Ruben, and maybe you can add to this. I think, well, actually, to be honest, I haven't seen, and maybe I've been working with this for too short time or with the wrong companies, but I haven't seen actually RGM tool as such in place, which would do all the things. Because, and I was even thinking myself, I'll maybe develop it myself, and then I will be more rich than I am today. But I think each company, each category, each country, it's very different and very specific. And then each, as Ruben also mentioned, I mean, it also depends on what you're focusing on. Is it the pricing? Is the promotion? Because actually each of these levers, so pricing, trade promotion management, assortment management, and then trade spend discount management, would actually require a different specific tool. In many cases, the same data behind it could be, but but this would be a very, very, very complex tool, and it would have to be almost built for every company. It's based on my experience at least. So that's why I think starting from because we've seen that happening actually. We started with a tool, but then it turned out that the tool actually is not fitting the needs of the market, because each market is different. I had actually such a situation when I was implementing a big SAP tool in one of the Nordic markets, and it turned out that the tool was not, even though it was super expensive, the tool was not set up actually to support us, unfortunately. I hope there's no one from SAP here, but and I'm sure it's not SAP fault. But it's but at least, so that I would definitely not recommend starting from the tool. I would recommend starting from I would definitely recommend starting with strategy, and then because to define what you want to focus on, how you want to do it, set up the KPIs, make sure you have capabilities, develop the process, play a little bit in the Excel, and then when you have this in place, then look for the tool. That's what we would recommend. Ruben, what do you think? Do you have some other opinion?
Absolutely. Now, sometimes maybe the confusion comes with, there is one element where you need to upgrade the tool, existing tool, which is the commercial planning and tracking. Yeah, I mean, you typically have already in your systems the commercial planning and tracking capabilities, but being able to understand, Maciej was talking about the root cause analysis. Yeah, if your net revenue per kilogram is not developing as you expected, how much is coming from pricing, how much is coming from mix, how much is coming, and so on. This is something which the existing systems, commercial planning and performance tracking system, typically can't deliver if you don't modify them. Yeah. So if I was to choose one tool which can be, generally speaking, relevant, is this one, but it's not necessarily a tool. It's just updating, and upgrading, if you want, the existing tools as to be able to plan and then track the business according to the RGM principles and mindset.
So we only have time for one more question, but before I do ask that, I did want to mention that PACE is going to have its first conference, its virtual conference, this September 14th and 15th. We're calling it Profits Plus, and more information will be forthcoming. But again, save the date. So the last question is, and I'll leave the slide up, how can we implement this RGM approach for multiple product segments across different geological space?
Sure. It's okay. Take it, Rubén.
Yeah, but geological or geographical?
Geographical. It was typo. Geographical.
Okay. So I think, well, product segments. I would imagine that when we talk about product segments, we're eventually talking about different categories.
I think it's about different portfolio. Yeah, it's similar case to the one which I'm working on now, actually, maybe.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just, we have already mentioned it. If we're talking about different categories, or then take each of them separate. I mean, don't try to copy paste. I mean, there are certain principles which apply nearly everywhere, but then you really need to actually go analyze the reality of the market, of the category, of your position in the market, and then based on that, yeah, apply the principles which apply to everyone, but in a smart way, if you want, into an adapted way, depending on many things like your market positioning, how do you the margin split, which Maciej was talking about at the beginning. How much of the system margin are you getting? How much is your how much are your customers getting? All of those things can be different depending on the category and on the geography. So yeah, I would say take a segmented approach. Basically, that's what at this stage, with this level of information we have about the case, is what we could say. I don't know, Maciej, maybe you have something.
Yeah, it's exactly as Rubén. We are completely aligned on that, because that's typically in such a situation. If you want to implement RGM and you are serious about it, then start with one of the categories which we see there could be the biggest potential, and you have maybe challenges there, and start there and do, like we call it, like a pilot. So you can test different approaches, different pricing approach and all that, and start with the insight, start with the market, because each category, I mean, in order to do a proper RGM, you need the proper insights per each category, per each market, because at least in Europe, the consumption occasions and consumption, the way people consume products, even the same products, is very different across the market. So I don't know if you know, but like Norway and Sweden, I think, the way they consume fish, they will be very different. Or the way they consume alcohol in Finland and Sweden is also very different. So that's why you would approach those markets very differently.
Can I interrupt for a moment and ask you to stop sharing so we can see the slide that I'm displaying?
Sorry. So yeah, okay, segmented approach, and then take the learning and move on to the, how do I do this? And move on to the other categories. Let's start from the most important one. Yeah.
Okay, well, I said so. Thank you for an interesting presentation. I think we all learned a lot today, and I think you can now see my slide about the upcoming PACE virtual conference, September 14th and 15th. It's going to be very exciting. A lot of great speakers that we're working to line up as we speak. And we will be sending out more information about it in the coming weeks. So please keep on the lookout for that and save the date. And thank you to our speakers. It was a very, again, great, insightful presentation. Appreciate you taking the time to present to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to everyone.
Okay.